It's a tradition here during the Yamim Noraim that right before Yom Kippur, we hear words of tshuva from our Rosh Yeshiva, which we are going to do right now. Please give your attention to Rabbi Harcsztark. Taking your notes on this.
Thank you, Ms. Schlaf. I have to say that I'm always very grateful that I have this opportunity to spend a half hour or so just talking to you really seriously about things that I think are very important for us as a community. I know that on the one hand, the idea of having kind of the last half hour before everybody goes home and is out of school is a difficult kind of slot, because the only thing that's standing between you and going home is me. On the other hand, I feel like this is the last few moments that we spend together before breaking for the holiest day of the year. Some 6 hours from now, we will all be standing in shul beginning Yom Kippur, that holiest day. And so what I ask from everybody is if you can just kind of do that mental shift, because what I'd like to do is take a few moments to talk to you about something that I think is really important. So I had planned from the beginning, like when the year started, that I was going to address our theme of the year, which is Avodat Hashem. I found myself, though, when I was thinking about it, I found myself interested in what it meant for other people, not just, okay, what's on my mind. So I realized that I have a building full of very wise colleagues, and I decided to ask them. So I wrote this email late last week. I will read it to you. I wrote, "Good morning, everyone. This Monday is the annual Tshuva talk. I plan on addressing our theme, Avodat Hashem, in the talk. I'm interested in hearing about those who have served as models of Avodat Hashem for you. If you are so inclined, I would appreciate your sharing 4 or 5 sentences on a personality. Who is the person, the name of the person, if you're game, the role of the person in your life, and what specific characteristics or actions make this person a role model in this area, or even better, if you have one, a story that would reflect that." So I sent this on Friday. I received pretty quickly about 15, 16 responses from faculty members, and actually they were really beautiful to read in a way in which makes me feel like I'd like to get that from all the faculty members, maybe even from all students. There was something very powerful about seeing people's reflections on this question put down on paper. But as I was reading them, there was a certain pattern that began to emerge. So I want to start by sharing with you some of the examples, and you should see if a pattern emerges for you as you're reading them. I'll tell you who wrote. I picked a bunch, and I'll tell you who wrote them. First one is from, I don't have to cheer. First one is from Ms. Birnbaum. She actually was the one who responded within 5. I didn't mean you don't have to. To be clear, I didn't mean, okay, Rabbi Birnbaum is clapping, so I guess I can't, yes. I just want to say that I didn't mean you don't have to cheer, but you can if you want to. I meant, don't, right. So Ms. Birnbaum responded actually very quickly, and I think, there was something in that, like, oh, this is, it struck me in terms of how quickly it came back. She wrote, "A personal role model was my paternal grandmother. Both my grandparents grew up with a traditional conservative background. When they moved to Teaneck, they became one of the founding families of the Orthodox community and became more committed to their Judaism. My strongest memories of my grandmother, which will stay with me forever, is seeing her with her siddur sitting in our living room, davening in the morning. And after every meal, taking out a bencher to bench. Although we were not benching as a family, she always made sure to do it on her own. After she passed away, I found a siddur in my house with her handwriting on a Post-it note in the front cover. It said, "Prayer of Healing," with the page number. Every time I go to my parents' house, I use that siddur to daven. I'm going to stop for 1 second. You heard one example, and I'd like your imagination to run a little bit. We all know family members, parents, grandparents, kind of the history of our own respective families. Let your imagination run and imagine what for each of these people Avodat Hashem meant on the ground, not as an abstraction, but as a concrete idea. 2, Mr. Fleischer. Mr. Fleischer said, "My dad." He was a rabbi in a small town. We were the only religiously observant family in the town, really in the county. I remember him practicing mitzvot like tashlich, walking to the lake alone to say tashlich, or driving 30 minutes to catch a minyan for a yahrzeit, or getting kosher meat 45 minutes away, or just wearing a kippah, walking around the streets of our town. Something about the isolation generated by his observance spoke to me of Avodat Hashem in a pretty pure sense. He was just unafraid to be different. Rabbi Block wrote, "I've really always looked up to my father." Rabbi Block's father has been a shul rabbi in Long Island for decades. The ability to do what God and your tradition asks of you, even when it's uncomfortable or is not resonant, that means you're not feeling it personally at that moment, and to cull the depths of understanding, to find meaning in all that you do, not as a precondition to that performance. That means it's not like it's meaningful and therefore I do it, but as a byproduct of it. It means I do it and then I find meaning. That's one of the greatest lessons I've learned from him. Mr. Nadel actually described a teacher, I think Ms. Schlaf, this will connect with you as well, of Rabbi Eliezer Cohn. And this is of a write-up of a teacher in Detroit, a Rebbe, a Rav, and the write-up is as follows. "I will never forget the image of Rabbi Cohn sitting in the back of the Akiva Shul, dressed in his stylish tweed jacket and sock tie, with a bulging shirt pocket stuffed to the brim with notes, pens, and trinkets, sitting by his famous stender, leaning back ever so slightly in his seat, peering through his octagon-shaped glasses at a Gemara as he quietly awaited everyone's arrival for minyan in the morning. This image of discipline, consistency, and devotion to Tefillah and Talmud Torah will forever be etched in my mind." Ms. Schlaf wrote, "We tend to think about spirituality, even Avodat Hashem, as being about amazing spiritual moments. My grandfather was a model of Avodat Hashem for me because of the way his Avodat Hashem was integrated into the regularity of his daily life. This is Avodah part of Avodat Hashem." And she describes 3 examples. When I was a little kid, he always reminded me to say Shema first thing when I got into bed. Can you get into that zone? Like imagine what that is, a grandparent with a grandchild getting into bed saying, "Say Shema," before I would read or before he would read to me so that I wouldn't fall asleep reading and forget to say Shema. It kind of annoyed me that he always reminded me of this, but I got the message that saying Shema on a regular basis was really important and not something you could just forget to do one day. He learned Daf Yomi every day. There was a regularity to this ritual that was a real avodah, real work, not always spiritual or feel good or moving, but really meaningful in the type of daily commitment it was. On Shabbat, he always sang Zmirot at the Shabbos table, the same Zmirot every week. He had a terrible voice. There's beautiful, it's like literary in terms of like imagining real, concrete Avodat Hashem in people's lives. I'm going to share with you 2 more. Dr. Steinberg. I'd probably first name my parents, who lived for over 40 years in the tiny community of Fredonia, New York. How many people have been in Fredonia, New York? No, you haven't. Where I grew up. not where I grew up, where Dr. Steinberg grew up. This is a great statistic. Population, 10,000. Jewish population, about 100 in 1971 when they moved there, and between 10 and 12 in the last decade. They kept the shul running for many years, with my father leading services, laning, davening, almost always without a minyan, building the sukkah, running the community seder, conducting funerals, preparing the very few local Jewish secular kids for B'nai Mitzvah. You get the idea. They took care of the last remaining elderly Jews in town, buying and delivering kosher food from the nearest butcher, 50 miles away. Dr. Broder is our last example. I would submit my maternal grandfather as my role model. Dr. Broder's grandfather, born in downtown Baltimore, I love this, he fought in World War II, managed a gas station his entire working life in downtown Baltimore, and suffered from Parkinson's for the final decade of his life. He lived to see 10 grandchildren, over 20 great-grandchildren. He was a paragon of serving God in his community in the details that make big differences. He arrived early to shul, was always the last man out to lock up, and took care of his shul's tzedakah box and food orders. Even more, he lived for shul on Shabbos. I recall, as a child, always walking to shul with him, only surprised and frustrated to find that we had arrived 20 to 30 minutes early. For him, a timely arrival meant being absolutely prepared, focused, and ready before davening started. I'm saying to you now, as each of these stories came in via email, one at a time, and maybe you experienced this as you heard these stories as well, I began to detect some patterns, something that I had not expected. The three things that stand out to me: first, how many teachers chose parents or grandparents as their models for Avodat Hashem. 80% basically of the group chose parent or grandparent. The others chose a teacher or a Rabbi. That says something very important. It's not something I want to focus on today, but in thinking about whatever it is that you think about now, years, think about the ways in which people reflect back, there's something very powerful there. I would like to focus on two characteristics that permeated every one of the stories. First, the Avodat Hashem was reflected in small acts. And by small, I don't mean they were insignificant. By small, I just mean it's without fanfare, it's not changing the world, it's just a regular, daily act. And second, those were small acts that reflected commitment, persistence, and determination. Persistence that had become part of each person's very being. You feel what I'm saying? You understand what I mean by that? Small acts, persistently done. When we listen to these examples, we're actually starting at the end of a person's life. Meaning, listen, what we're hearing now, the next generation looking back, many of these people are no longer alive, and saying, when I look back at the lives that these people led, I see these people as models of Avodat Hashem, and here's why. What we should do is start at the beginning. Can we unpack how that happens? If I woke up one morning and decided I would like to be an Oved Hashem, how would I do it? What would it look like? So I want to start by focusing on the word itself. We often soften the word avodah. We like to say things like Avodat Hashem means serving God. Serving is kind of like you're wearing a tuxedo and bringing a tray of tea to say, like that kind of, there's something very, relatively speaking, luxurious. But what it really means, and I'd like to ask you to take a serious look at that and not, I'll say, be afraid of it. What it really means is labor. It means hard work. We know what it means to do hard work. Every person in this room has worked hard. Some more often, some less so. And to appreciate what we are called upon to do in Avodat Hashem, I would like to draw some comparisons to examples that are familiar to us from regular life in school. I'm going to give you two examples. The first example I'm giving you from my own family life with permission of my kids. And I hope this doesn't feel kind of awkward. I have 4 kids, Baruch Hashem. They are all great in their own ways. I'm going to focus on my twin boys. My twin boys, they were born, I'm not going to go that far back. Okay. One was born with, I'll say, natural athletic talent. One was born, he gave me permission to say this, with less natural athletic talent. The one with natural athletic talent made the hockey team in 6th grade. The other one didn't. The one who didn't said, I like hockey. I actually want to play. I want to make the team. I'm like, okay, go for it. And he worked and worked and worked in order to make the team in 7th grade. And he made the team and played a little. And then he played more in 8th, and he played more in 9th. And I think there's something tremendously inspiring about that idea. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about, like, what are the elements that go into that. But I'm picking that as an example. That was Romy, by the way. I'm picking that as an example of something that we relate to because it's part of our lives. We know what it means to actually work hard. I'll give something that, okay, this is school, right? So we know, we decide we're in school. You say, okay, I really want to do well. This is like one of those schools where that's what people do. They want to do well, they work hard. Do you know what it means to work hard? I stay up late, I do my work, I ask cry, I do this, I do that. It's really important to me in order to be successful. So that's working hard. What makes somebody work hard on something? If I take hockey, I'll say it like this. You see people playing it, you want to be a part of it, so you work at it. That's your own feelings, your own interest. With school, it's a little different, I think. The system communicates that you have to work hard to get into a good college, to get a good job. One motivation is internal, one motivation is hopefully also internal, but there's a big external push. Both sources of motivation cause a person to make a decision. This is the decision. I want to be that kind of person. Whatever it is, that kind of person. I have this in bold on my sheet. I want to express it to you in bold. We do not do this type of thinking when it comes to Avodat Hashem. We, us, not all Jews, this group. Or we don't do it enough. I'm obviously not coming to slam we don't do it as well as we should. Maybe it's something about religion having become a private matter. Whatever the explanation, I don't think we do it as well as we could. But we could. We could transfer the lessons of hard work to our religious work as well. And I want to put a little parentheses about sports because I'm going to pick that as an example. I love the fact that we have really competitive teams. And I'm not saying it's only about sports. I'm picking sports as the example. I like kids to play hard. I like us to win. I like us to win and lose with grace when that happens. I think it's great. But let's face the reality. Nobody, almost nobody, is going to be playing professional sports when they graduate SAR high school. But sports and things like it can impact a person's life forever. And here is one profound way in which that can happen. Take the lessons, the ethics that you learn in sports, and transfer them to your Avodat HaKodesh, to the sacred sides of your life. To explain what I mean, Avodat Hashem is about hard work. It's about developing skills and capacity. It is about growing in a particular area, growing in a person's service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I want to be a little more concrete for a second. What do we do when we decide to work hard on something? Think of whatever it is that you work hard on. If it's school, if it's sports, if it's drama, if it's music, if it's whatever it is. I'm going to put forward 3 things. You can make a different list. I'm going to say when you decide you take something seriously, you set goals for yourself. I want to improve my shot. I want to get more playing time. I want to make it to the first line. I want to have a starting role I want to have a starring role in a play. I want to sing a solo. I want to do whatever it is. I'm studying for the ACT. I want to break a 30. I want to break a 1200. I want to break a 4. Whatever that is, this is my goal. After you set your goals, you practice. Over and over and over again, you practice. And you consult with experts. That means if you're a sports guy, you love your coach. If you're a drama person, you reach out to that person and say, how can I do this differently? You're studying for those college tests, you hire somebody who's going to help you. And then you practice. If we were actually serious about Avodat Hashem, and it's kind of like, imagine it for a second. You'd say, what kind of person do I want to be? What are my goals? How am I going to get there? Who's going to help me? Do we do that with religion? We should. And what would it look like to practice or consult with experts around something like that? I'm just going to give you like a small personal example because it's what came to my mind. When I graduated high school and I was in Israel, I decided one year that year I wanted to learn all of the Rambans on Chumash. Seemed like should you review the Parsha? Should all the Rambans on Chumash. So I planned it out. So when I do it, I'm going to do it over the course of a year, each week. I need to find a chavruta who's interested in doing that. I need someone who knows it well enough so that I can ask questions if there's something I don't understand. I have to find a text that's going to be helpful. These are steps that you're used to doing in other areas of life. We do it all the time. I'm not sure how often we do it, and when it comes to, am I growing as a religious person in terms of my avodat Hashem, shmirat hamitzvot, study of Torah, kindness, chesed, etc. I'm not saying we don't do those things. We do lots of actions like that. I'm focused specifically on what it means to grow. I'm going to leave out, or I'll make a brief reference because there should be some concrete Torah here, but the Rambam is actually very specific about it. When he talks about establishing traits, he says, "Ketzad yargil adam atzmo b'deyot elu." How do you establish these things for yourself? And he says, you should perform a 3rd time, the acts which conform to the standards of the middle road temperaments. Yaseh, yishaneh, yishalesh. How often do we come to davening and say, well, it's not working? Now, I know on the other hand, it's like, what do you mean? I go to davening every single day. Again and again and again and again. Okay, what we're doing on Yom Kippur is, what Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is about, let's stop for a second. Who do I want to be? What do I want to achieve? How am I going to get there? Who's going to help me? So that's been my summary so far. I have one more part to this. So far, I want to say that Avodat Hashem means actually working hard to grow. The stories have shown us that the way that actually happens is not by things that are changing the planet. I had a one-time thing that changed the world. No. Every day, with persistence and determination, by setting goals, by practicing, by finding people who can help me. So if the idea is to set goals and work hard and practice, how do you know if it's working? Rav Eliyahu Dessler was one of the great Baalei Musar in the mid-20th century in England and in Israel. He gives the following mashal to explain the deepest significance of what it really means to have bechira chofshit, freedom to choose. He says, imagine 2 countries at war. The front, that means the battlefront, is the place where the battle, right? That's where the two sides are fighting. The territory that is behind the front lines, one side is controlled by one country, other side, that's controlled, the territory that's controlled by the other country. If one country conquers land from the other, the border shifts. The front lines shift, and more territory is under the control of the victor. You get the mashal? There's a place, there's a battle, somebody conquers it, the line moves. The front is now moved to a different location. Rav Dessler posits that every person has and if you can internalize two Hebrew words, Ellie? If you can internalize two Hebrew words, he calls it a nikudat habechira, the point of choice, the specific point or moment of choice. And for each person, the nikudat habechira is different, based on how he or she was raised and based on other choices he or she has made throughout one's life. Listen to this and you'll see if this makes sense. For example, for some, whether to eat kosher or not is a choice. Where I am in my life, the way I was raised, it's actually a decision. Should I eat kosher or should I not eat kosher? For others, they were just raised to eat kosher. It's not even a choice. Now, is it a choice? Like, do I have the free will to decide to not do that? Yes. But Rav Dessler said that's not a real choice. Obviously, it's a choice. You can rebel, not rebel. But in terms of my character, the point is, where am I? What am I really deciding between right now? For some, the nekudat habechira is whether to daven every day or not. For others, they might daven every day, but do they daven 3 times a day? You get the idea. Real avodat Hashem means that our line, our personal battlefront, our nekudat habechira, is moving in the right direction. But it has to be moving. For too many of us, the line doesn't move. What we do what we do, and that's it. Being an Oved Hashem is precisely the opposite. We have to keep moving one foot in front of the other, one small act at a time. That means that things that previously were challenges should now become second nature, meaning if it was really true, then what would be happening is I haven't made brachot all the time before I eat. Now I'm in 10th grade. You know what? I can do that. I'm going to take it seriously. I haven't taken it seriously. I'm going to start making brachot. Then that becomes conquered territory. And then you realize the next thing. But you know what? I'm doing a lot of Lashon Hara. I gossip, I don't know, my online presence, should be different. There are a million things like that. The examples I have here, as I grow older, the line should keep moving. Now I daven every day. Then I daven 3 times a day. Now I daven with a minyan. Or, I learned Torah in school. Why should I learn Torah out of school? Now I start reading a Dvar Torah on the Parsha on Shabbos. Then I start learning maybe Torah for 5 minutes a day when I'm off from school. This isn't this is a lifetime. Think of those people in the stories in the beginning. It's like you make decisions. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You make one decision. I'm going to do this for a while. You know what? That's become part of me. I wonder what it is that I'm wrestling with now. Now I'm wrestling with the next step. I have to say the Kibbut Av V'Eim is an example like that. It used to be really annoying when I have to do an errand for my parents. Now it's easier for me to do an errand for my parents. Maybe I should try to seek out opportunities where I can do things for my parents. Same kind of thing with chesed. This season of tshuva is calling us to seriously consider how well we are doing with our avodat Hashem. The truth is that too often we don't make the most of the opportunity. We tend to get complacent. And the deep truth is, and this is the deep, deep truth, I think, we fear change. It's easy to say, I'm religious enough. What do I have to take stock? Why change? So, it's a good question. Why change? And this is my last piece. I'd say 2 things, which is probably 3 things. I think the first thing I have to say is why change? Because if we believe that we're Ovdei Hashem, we should do things because it's God's will. And I think that's really important. But in addition to that, the Jewish people really need you. And at this point, I'm actually talking to you. You means the students of SAR High School, not the students in some other town, not the students in a different kind of school, not the students in this group of people. Modern Orthodox community has a special mission. And as communities go, we are the smallest percentage of all denominations and communities in the Jewish population studies. 3% of Jews in America. Yet we have a most inspired and inspiring message, but it takes hard work. Aseret Yemei Teshuvah is a time to take stock and reflect, to consider who we have been and who we want to become. And the second reason to really try, I think you will really enjoy it. You would thrive. We will all be happier in our Jewish lives. And as Mr. Fleischer pointed out to me, this is a special kind of happiness. Not the shallow kind, not the kind you get if you won fantasy football that week, but a more fulfilled, deep, personal kind of happiness. One that changes you, changes us, and God willing should cause our children and grandchildren to tell those kinds of stories about us when it's 80, 100 years from now. The psychologist Carol Dweck has written a lot about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I got about 2 more minutes. People with a fixed mindset believe that their traits are just givens. They have a certain amount of brains and talent, and nothing can change that. If they have a lot, they're all set. But if they don't, they're in trouble. So people in this mindset worry about their traits and how adequate they are. They have something to prove to themselves and to others. People with a growth mindset, on the other hand, see their qualities as things that can be developed through their dedication and effort. Sure, they're happy if they're brainy or talented, but that's just the starting point. They understand that no one has ever accomplished great things, not Mozart, Darwin, or Michael Jordan, without years of passionate practice and learning. A person, I say, who is growing religiously is religiously happy. Today, I want to stress the importance of authentic avodat Hashem, really working to grow as a Jew. And that happens by doing 3 things: setting goals, practicing, and consulting with the experts. And remember those stories with which we began, small actions, not big heroic ones, a bracha, a kindness, daily Torah, wearing a kippah or tzitzit, the basic stuff of everyday Jewish life performed with consistency and commitment. We have heard that that inspires children and grandchildren. It literally inspired the next generation of teachers, your teachers. It is my deepest hope that we as a community, one small step, one small commitment at a time, can become an even stronger community of Ovdei Hashem, committed with pride to Torah, mitzvot, chesed, and to growing together in all of these areas. May the Ribono Shel Olam bless us with a year of growth, achievement, health, happiness, and a year of security and peace for Am Yisrael and around the world. Before I dismiss you, I just want... Thanks. Those who are able, we would like to daven Ma'ariv upstairs immediately following. Gmar Chatima Tova. Thank you all very much.